What the city is talking about. This is Montreal Now on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, I'd like to read your first note here, which says, when it seems like everyone needs to switch to decaf, there's something very wrong with our politics. Explain.
Absolutely. Why is everyone so angry? I mean, genuinely angry. We've had two episodes with Jagmeet Singh so far. One that you and I discussed that was videoed outside of the House of Commons, where he very righteously dealt with a couple of punks who were trying to bully him. But then again in the House, and we can't tell because the speaker turned off the mics, but it looks like Mr. Singh actually went down the aisle towards the other opposition bench where Pierre Poilievre was sitting and essentially said, you want to take this outside? You want a piece of me? I mean, I'm not saying he said that, but words to that effect there. And then we have Premier François Legault, who is really, I don't know, it's like he's kind of like Blofeld in the last 20 minutes of a Bond film. He was saying, bring down the government and do this and, blow it all up because we can't do that. I can't do anything anymore. And I'm really wondering whether, as it does to you and me and our listeners and everybody, whether this particular mode of life that we're living now is also inserting itself into our political process, that in fact there's simply too much for anyone, even a veteran, to deal with, because it is all happening so quickly, all happening at once. The process, the rhythm of our political system has in fact become nothing more than a swipe left kind of a situation. I would respectfully submit, I mean, you and I and a lot of our listeners grew up without an internet. We spent most of our lives without an internet. But for those who have only known the internet, I think that your perception of how things happen and what causes things to happen is completely different. And the idea that, we were raised, you have to look at the big picture. I think for a lot of us now, that big picture is no larger than the screen in the palm of our hand. Okay. And the other thing I want to say about this, and you're saying, well, obviously it's a Friday and Mennie's going over the edge. But the thing is, we have Angus Reid. We talk about their poll results all the time. The latest popularity for the federal parties, the Conservatives have 43%. They're leading the Liberals by more than 20 points. But here's what's crazy. Those numbers suggest that Pierre Poilievre doesn't need Quebec. If the election is called, he's going to blow the doors off. Huge majority. That same polling firm that suggests that will happen also, with the same panel of respondents, found that 54% of respondents across the board, gender, age, you name it, think that the Poilievre Conservatives have a hidden agenda, and they're not going to reveal it until after they win the election. And yet they're still leading by several light years in this federal. I can remember. I'm not that old, Aaron. I can remember when if you thought somebody had a hidden agenda, you might not want to vote for them. But those days seem to be past, or at least maybe people are saying, oh, no, that's one thing, but this is another. They can't sort of like meld the two things together. But all that said, I'm just seeing too many theoretically mature, experienced politicians come close to losing their poop this week, and it does not bode well. We have another at least, year until the next federal election. God help us, 2 years for the next provincial election. I don't think this is sending a message of confidence to anybody, whether it's investors in Quebec, whether it's the electorate, whether it's the people who, good Lord, and I'm going to sound so naive here, the people who like to think they can trust their government. I know one thing that governments are not doing, and it's going to sound very, very naive, but it's true. The last thing a lot of governments seem able to do right now is give anybody hope. And I think that is a real problem, whether it's, whether on the one hand we have Poilievre saying everything is broken and the world's on fire, or we have Trudeau saying, we've got to do A, B, and C, or the world will be on fire because of climate change and this and that. And we have to really, whip ourselves. I can remember a time not that long ago when politicians perhaps inspired us to be more than who we are. I don't hear any of that anymore. And maybe because of that absence of hope, that absence of inspiration, we're seeing it take its toll on the very, very people who should be on the front lines of this.
You know, it's hard to argue against anything that you said. I mean, we can't get into people's heads necessarily, but I wonder, you know, if this is a matter for people, and again, to your point, conservatives to win, but Poilievre doesn't, of course, match up with the numbers for the party itself because there are too many people out there who either, I don't know, don't believe him, think he's a blowhard, whatever the reason happens to be. And I think we're kind of looking at a situation now of the lesser of all evils, right? It's not like you look at one party and go, well, I can't vote for them, so I vote for... It's like nobody wants to vote for any of these three parties. I can't tell you how many calls like that I took earlier in this week when I asked that question, right? Where people are so detached from individual political parties that maybe in the past they would have supported. That's not there anymore.
I know, and what's crazy is, and I don't think I'm overstating it, there is so much more at stake in these latest elections, that, you know, in the coming elections than perhaps ever before. We have very differing views, not just of where Canada is going to go, but where Quebec is going to go, and to a certain extent, I guess, you know, when we find out who's running, where Montreal is going to go. And I guess the thing that worries me the most is it's one thing to see the politicians starting to burn out, but if the electorate gets exhausted, if the electorate becomes indifferent, I think we're approaching a real crisis of governance, not just democracy, but just the whole system. The idea of whatever holds things together seems to be, the entropy seems to be setting in, and there seems to be nothing on the horizon that's going to turn that around.
Look, I want to move on, and it's still in the realm of politics, but you have a note today on the, you know, Montreal mayoralty here. So the question is, will running the mayor for it remain a tough sell? We're still roughly a little over a year away from a municipal election.
Well, also Montreal announced that it's looking for a
that's
leader.
what I was going to say. I see today they're going to have a leadership race, if you will. Anybody in that party you think can stand up and go, yeah, I'm going to take it, because it's not Arif Salem.
No, it's not Arif Salem. The party president was making noises that he might be interested in it. A gentleman by the name of Caroline Police, I presume I'm pronouncing that correctly. They also, Radio Canada had a great report suggesting that, you know, Luc Poirier, who most of our listeners have never heard of, but he is a multi-millionaire real estate developer. He's the guy who sold the property for the Northvolt project. So he's sitting on a pile of cash, which, quite frankly, I'm very sorry. And don't take this the wrong way, Aaron. I'm almost happy to vote for a millionaire for public office because I'm pretty sure they're not doing it for the money. But all that said, he's kind of joking. He didn't say one way or another way if he's going to do it, but he said if I did do it, my slogan would be, let's save Montreal. And I think that's what's at stake in this next election. I think we are really looking at someone who can turn around and actually, you know, grab the steering wheel and actually change course for this city. And I'm very sorry, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer on a Friday, but the fact is I've never despaired more for Montreal's future than I am now. And not just because of what this administration has done, but also because of the whole vibe that you're getting in Montreal right now, which is, you know, it doesn't work. It's not going to work. We have to make do with what we have. And this idea of people who are saying, wow, world-class city, it's like, you know, they might get laughed out of town. I don't like seeing Montreal reduced to that, but that seems to be where we are. So it'll be fascinating to see who steps up for the job, who steps up to as we say, you know, save Montreal, and whether or not this race will be a little more interesting perhaps than it was the last time.
You think this is a function of us having, you know, gotten older and lived here for so long and looking at this and then putting it into perspective and realizing it's never been this bad?
Pretty much. I mean, you're talking to a guy who moved out of Montreal. I lived in Montreal for 35 years, and I left, and I've said it on air because I couldn't take it. I got fed up of living in a place where nothing works for longer than 3 days at a time, where you have to have public consultations to determine what day they're going to pick up your garbage. I'm sorry. Life is not supposed to be that complicated when you're living in a world-class city, and yet it's become that way. So, you know, maybe someone can turn that around. Maybe someone can say, you know what, we don't have to do all this nonsense. We just have to, you know, and you know what, damn it, I'm going to build buildings higher than Mount Royal. I mean, and right now, I'm sure there's half our listeners have had a mild stroke hearing me say that. But somebody who's going to break out of the pack and say we can be a world-class city, we just have to stop staring at our navel 28/7 every single day. And perhaps maybe we'll get things done.
You just add 4 hours to the day, 28/7?
Yeah, you heard. Yeah,
Wow.
That's really intense.
Weekend
I'm glad
is
you
here.
caught that.
The weekend is here. Weigh in really quick on my question today, Jim. City of Montreal wants 300 photo radar installations across the island. What do you think?
Give them 600. Make every single yahoo behind the wheel of a car in Montreal jelly-like with fear. and make them obey the speed limit and the highway code. The more the merrier, I say, bring it on.
God, I hope tongue is firmly planted in cheek. James MENNIE at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, have a good weekend.
You too, buddy.